Yeah, so it is 1:05, so we're probably going to be getting started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Tech Futures panel. This is the first one in the little series that we're going to be having this afternoon. So each of our speakers here today are software engineers at their respective companies, as you can see from their nicknames. And the way that this panel is going to be working is that first, we're going to be having a couple of moderated questions that we'll be asking for the first half hour or so of our panel. You can feel free to also drop some questions in the chat as they come up if you want to, but we're also going to be having some time at the end for guests to be able to ask any questions that they might want. Our panel is also currently being live streamed on our website, YouTube, and Twitch channels. So there are going to be a couple of audience members who are watching from those channels instead of joining the Zoom call live. And we're going to be having another panel directly after this for people who are interested in maybe pursuing higher education in computer science. So if you want to, do a master's or PhD or something, that's going to be following right after. It will be in this same room. So what's going to happen is that if we do happen to run over time, I'm going to open breakout rooms, and each of our panelists, if they're able to stay, of course, or if we finish early, are going to split into separate breakout rooms, and you have the chance to kind of, decide which breakout room you want to talk to, who you kind of want to speak a little bit more with one-on-one. And of course, our panelists aren't obligated to stay past the 1 o'clock time, past 2 o'clock when this panel ends. But if we do, finish the whole question portion early, then that's something that we can definitely open up for everyone. Does anyone have any questions before we get started, about the logistics of everything? If not, I'm going to go ahead and hit record.
Recording in progress.
All right, so we can go ahead and get started with a couple of introductory questions. So can each of our panelists tell us a little bit about yourself, your major, your alma mater, graduation year, current role at the company, any other fun facts?
I can go first. So I'm Ethan. I graduated from UCSD with a BS in computer science last December, so December 2019, not 2020. I guess that was last summer. And in last April, I started working at Salesforce as an AMTS, which is their entry-level software development role. And I do full stack development.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Hershita. I graduated last June, and I studied computer science and engineering. And I work at Optimizely, as you can tell from my title. And I started working there in June as well, since I couldn't take my post-grad vacation that I'd hoped to take.
Oof. Okay, I'll go next. My name is Thomas. I'm a software engineer at Google. Yeah, I work in security and privacy, doing a bit of data engineering. I graduated from UC Davis with degrees in computer science and statistics. So I really like working on data from a programmatic point of view, I guess in a way. Yeah, I started in April during the pandemic. I missed the cutoff for being in the office. And so I've never seen my teammates. I think that goes for a lot of you. So it's been an interesting path, but hopefully we'll get to be back in the office soon and see everyone.
Hey everyone, I'm Jimmy. I graduated class of 2019 from Cornell with an MEng in computer science. I also did my undergrad at Cornell. I've been working at a tech startup called Gusto ever since. And for those unfamiliar with Gusto, it's basically a company that offers a service to help small businesses onboard, pay, and engage their teams. And at Gusto, I work on the growth team, which is responsible for getting new customers and onboarding anyone who wants to use our platform.
Cool. Thank you everyone for sharing. So next, if you could maybe describe a typical day in your position or at your company specifically, what kind of things you walk through or things you're responsible for.
Okay, so for me, I think like everyone, I'm working remote. So I'm actually in Massachusetts right now, and my team is in SF. So there's a bit of a time difference, which is actually good for me because I'm super not a morning person. So my typical day starts at like sometime between 12 to 1. I haven't gotten up before 12 in like a year now. Uh, and then, so I'll usually do a bit of work just to make sure like everything is good before stand up, which is at 2 p.m. for me. Typical stand up is everyone just shares what they've been working on for the past day, like any updates they have, any blockers they have. After that, I'll usually eat lunch at 3. And then for the rest of the day, I usually work until around 8 or 9, and I'll eat dinner sometime in there too. And then we all have like sprint takes assigned to us, so I'll just work on whatever I have. I probably work around like an hour or two at a time before taking a break. I usually find myself like losing a lot of productivity if I try to work longer than that. So I think it's good to kind of space things out. I think if I had to split it up, I think I'd probably spend like of my time working, maybe like 70% of coding and the last 30% thinking about like design, or like reviewing like other people's code, stuff like that.
Okay. Let's see. For me, I actually have a more conventional schedule, I guess. My time zones match. I'm in the same state as where I'm supposed to work. So I wake up around like 8. Actually, I don't need alarms or anything, which is really surprising. I think I'm becoming an adult now. And yeah, I go downstairs, pet the dog, talk to his family before starting work. And work, I catch up on emails, see what's been happening, see if there's been any bugs, any customer reports that we have to respond to. Once all that's done, we have like a tea time at 10 a.m. where we like all the like members of the team, we kind of just talk, chit chat, but everything that's not work. So it's kind of fun. It's a good way to start out the day. And then the rest of the day is either meetings or getting to work on new projects. And yeah, then I wrap up the end of the day and then kind of just lie in bed and just recover. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like that's pretty similar to my day as well. We have stand up at like 10:15, and so we have like one day that's like a no meeting day, which is really nice because you can focus and you have uninterrupted time. And yeah, we have like architecture meetings, like I think Ethan talked about, but it's nice to have like long chunks of time. If you all don't use this is for like students as well. If you like share calendars, Clockwise is really helpful because it lets you like chunk out your schedule for focus time and uninterrupted work time. But yeah, I'm also in the same time zone as my team, so it's pretty convenient. I'm in the East Bay and Optimizely is in SF. I think maybe I shared that earlier.
Yeah, so for me, my company is Orgusto is on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast. So typically like I'll log on at like around 10, then I'll like log off at around like 6. And day to day varies a lot actually. One thing I noticed is that we don't have like stand-ups anymore every morning. We used to when we were back in the office, but we sort of got rid of them as sort of the quarantine went on because people were finding like themselves spending too much time on Zoom and it was sort of becoming tiring. So we don't have daily stand-up anymore. We just have sort of like async check-ins and we'll check in once a week for stand-up. And in the past, I was pretty doing heavy stuff. So, every week during sprint planning, you get like 2 to 3 tickets to work on, mostly like full stack related stuff since we're working on a client facing product. Lately, it's been a little different. Like we're doing more so like planning related things. So like even engineers are spending time like gathering requirements for projects, like prioritizing work, like talking to other like non-engineering teams to try to figure out like what to do next. So lately felt like more of like a PM type role as an engineer, which is nice and refreshing. So yeah, day-to-day is very different depending on sort of what project we're working on. So yeah.
Cool. So it's pretty cool to kind of hear a little bit about how everyone's experiences differ depending on like what company they work with and where in the United States they're located. So next question is, how would you feel? How have you felt like the material you learned in college prepared you for your current position? And if it wasn't necessarily like the stuff that you learned in classes, like what did you feel like really helped as an undergrad preparing you for the role that you're currently in?
I think some parts I feel like certainly overprepared. Like I'm ready to use dynamic programming someday, but it hasn't come up yet. But in a lot of parts, like I'm definitely underprepared. I think one of the like surprisingly one of the more useful classes I took in undergrad was just called software engineering, because like the code you write in college is going to be a lot different from what you're doing in like enterprise software. Like coming in, there's just so many like different like systems, like libraries, frameworks that you end up having to use that you spend like a lot of time just reading on and learning how to use. And even sometimes like, even if the languages you're using are the same, like the way they're used is a lot different. I mentioned this earlier when people were still joining, but like enterprise Java is like a totally different beast from like what you did in college. Like you'll like open a file and like a single line is just like this like 10 class chain, and you have no idea what any of them are actually. Yeah, it's really crazy. But I do think when it comes to like actually writing code, I've been like very comfortable. I have had to like pick up a few languages. I think that's pretty normal. But like after having done that for like 4 years, it's not so hard anymore.
Yeah, I think I agree with Ethan that like working full time feels really different from being a college student and writing code, especially because like you have test cases that you're passing in school, but like at some larger companies there are like QA teams that are specifically assigned to you. And people write unit tests. Like people can just pass on testing to another team, but like at Optimizely, like all the teams like write unit tests because so we were a startup also, I should point that out, but we were acquired pretty recently, but still the practice has been to like write unit tests, test your own code, like in terms of integration testing. You're also just, you have a lot of responsibility like on your own end. I think when you're in school, you have a deadline for when the code is due. And the most similar thing at work is when like there's a product, like a feature that a customer is like on your PM's back for, but like other things that are maybe more like technical excellence oriented or like a new site, like for example, a project I'm working on right now is actually like a microservice like project where basically like you're taking code out of our monolith code base and making it a self-contained system. And a lot of what I've worked on is stuff that like I hadn't, learned about in school. And that's where I think like senior design really like helped me, I felt personally. And surprisingly OS, not that a lot of, concepts from OS come up, but like I actually surprisingly like, had to deal with a bug that did like, had like a queue and like a lock. But anyways, that's aside from the point. But poor K, if you can take operating systems with poor K, like you have to write so much code and you have to analyze your code and debug it with like a debugger, that I think that's a really good practice for school. Like 150 in senior design, I think were like the best classes out of my entire undergraduate career. And I studied CSE, so like I took a lot of extra classes that, yeah, they were like fine, but not as helpful as like those two.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said, especially about 150. I never took senior design, but like out of all the classes, I remember stuff from 150, which is surprising because I'm not known to remember stuff. But yeah, I don't think generally the stuff you learn in school is you can expect that to be applied in a high percentage to what you're doing at your job. Usually it's some area you haven't learned about, or maybe it's so fine-grained, it's so in-depth that like the high-level things that you learn in college is not going to be applicable. Because at least at Google, we have these teams that are working on specific problems. And so they want to do like focus on these specific problems, and they want to do them really well. So these high level concepts don't really help you as much, get you oriented, but once it comes time to solve the problem, you're gonna have to do more research on your own. But how school does help is you get into the habit of being in unfamiliar situations, unfamiliar concepts, and you have to solve them, whether it's networking, security, right? You would have to spin up, learn new things, and at the end, it's not necessarily what you learned that's important, it's how you learn that becomes really important in your career. And so just going through that process repeatedly over so many classes and so many class projects really helped me in my career just be not intimidated by new projects and new initiatives that our company takes on.
Yeah, so +1 to what everyone else said. Something you said, Thomas, that it really resonated with was it doesn't matter like what you do, it's more so like how you do it. And like I think that like a really large part of being good at your job as a full-timer is like understanding that particular domain that you're put in. Like in general, the longer you've spent in like that code base, the more of an expert you become. And like that's not stuff that like pick up from college. Although like what you can pick up is sort of like a knack and like this sort of ability to learn things quickly, like filter out what's not important, etc. Like that would really sort of carry you forward in your career, no matter like where you're working. And then something else that I sort of picked up in college that I had to throw out, employee, was sort of the habit of writing scrappy code in the quickest way possible to like pass a test case and just submit it for an assignment. Like that I had to completely throw out the window as a full-timer. You can't get away with that in industry, unfortunately. Like, because the code you write like could live there for years. Someone else is going to have to read it. Someone else is going to have to understand it and make changes to it. And you know, you really don't want to be sort of screwing someone over 3 years down the line when they look at your code and ask like, what did this person write?
Yeah.
So like there's a really like high emphasis on like the excellency of the code that you write. Like you have to thoroughly test it. It has to be readable. And like that's something that I didn't do in college that sort of kicked me in the butt when I first started.
Yeah. Man, +100 to that, like doc strings for like functions and stuff, like they teach you that. And then I think a lot of times you're like, yeah, like we'll do it. But like, it's so important to do that because you forget yourself. Like I've literally like looked back at code that I like wrote last year and I was like, wait, like, why did I do this? But you know, the doc string helped in enumerating it, but yeah.
Yeah, there's times where I'll look at this code and be like, who wrote this? And then like, I look back and it was actually me. And I'm like, yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, that Git blame exists.
You also might just get like roasted in code review by your senior engineers, so there's that too.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you everyone for sharing and for sharing some good advice about like your undergrad. So next, how do you feel that post-grad life has been compared to life in college? So like just in general, I guess.
This might be a weird one for all of us.
For us, yeah.
COVID.
I think there's some unique circumstances.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I could say though is that like in undergrad, it's really easy to fall into a trap of like, all right, like let's all study together, or let's all work on this together and brainstorm. But like one thing I think post-grad that you want to work on is your independent thinking ability. Like whether it's like, you know, designing a new system or like even how you're writing the code, like, yeah, you work with partners in a lot of your classes, but this is like more job related. I think really training yourself to, you know, develop that ability to think critically is really important, but also obviously maintain the ability to collaborate. Like, I think something that stood out to me post grad. This is a little tangential, but you have to really learn how to collaborate. Like, you can be a tech genius, but like, if you don't know how to work well with other people, like, you're not going to be able to drive projects forward. You're not going to be like, other people aren't going to want to hire you, because like, it's really important to, like, you know, be collaborative and kind. So yeah, I guess that's something that I didn't think like post grad that would work, because I would know people. I don't know if any of you here had like HackDavis for, no. Okay. Well, anyways, HackDavis was like this this lecturer that we had like 4 or 5 years ago that was notorious for having really, really difficult projects. And there would be like kids who were, like students who, you know, would do it in like 2 days, but they would do it on their own. They wouldn't work with their partner. And I'd be like, whoa, like, must be so amazing to just like finish HackDavis's like P5 in 2 days. And like, at the end of the day, like, those people are the people who actually have a hard time later on. Like, yeah, they're amazing at the code initially, but they couldn't, you know, like, work with a partner. And actually, I've talked to my brother about this, because one time I was helping with something for school, and he was like, it'll just take too long to like try to explain to you like what I'm doing for you to help me. And I was like, you have to develop that skill though, you know, like, you're gonna have to go talk to a senior engineer and be like, hey, you know. So yeah.
I agree. It's way easier to be out of your element at work than in college. It's not a scope project that you're usually working on. These projects have other dependencies who are owned by other teams and other people, and there are customers, and the whole area is just more ambiguous. Nothing is outlined for you. So if you're just working by yourself, and I made this mistake early on too, but if you're just trying to do it by yourself, you're not going to get very far. You have to collaborate. You have to be able to communicate. And that's something you don't necessarily learn in college, but I've had to pick it up. And it's honestly, it's so surprising how different it is. But not to say that we can't adjust. I think I've adjusted over time. And I think it's expected for new grads to not have that honed when you start, but you will learn over time. Yeah, in terms of how life is different, I guess, like, I'm in my room. Everyone's probably in their room. It's been kind of similar for now, but once life starts picking back up, I might have a different answer for you.
So I actually started, like, I was in the office for maybe like 6 months before we had to go back home. So I would say that those first 6 months were like a drastic improvement from college. I think the main thing that I really liked was there's like a very clear line between work and the rest of your life. If you choose to draw that line, like, you put in your 45 hours a week, and like the weekend is yours, which is like a novel concept that I don't think you will experience until like you're done with school. And yeah, like, that's great just to have like a work-life balance. I know people who sort of continue to carry their college work habits into their jobs, which is sort of like every single minute of my life is like for work. And I've seen that like nothing good comes out of that. That's just sort of how you burn out, especially as a new grad. Although there is sort of like less work to do post grad, I do find that like type of work that you do at work is like more tiring in a way. So like in college, you can sort of sit down for like 4 hours and just like bang out an assignment, get it done. Like, no one's going to bother you if you sit in the library or your room. At work, it's a lot different than that, because there's sort of just like a constant stream of distraction come your way. Like, teammates are going to want to talk to you. Like, you're going to get code review, and like there's just meetings all the time. So it's really hard to find that like 4-hour chunk of continuous work, unless you sort of have like a no meeting sort of day. So you sort of have to learn post-grad to context switch a lot and be able to like quickly move from one thing to, and that's like tiring in a different way than colleges, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I just want to like follow up on, like, once you start work, your life kind of becomes more structured again, because you're back to like this 9 to 5, or I guess 12 to 8, whatever schedule. And I like, even though you have like classes in college, I know personally I didn't go to most of mine, so like I had my day off basically every day, and that's just not a thing anymore. And then I also feel like a lot of the projects you get in college, like I'm certain I'm not the only one that's like left like half them off the last day or something, but that's just like not a thing when you work in industry. Also, like I guess a good thing for me is that industry, like your tickets are a lot smaller, so your maybe the end goal is the same, like big project, but you'll like be assigned things that are maybe like one step at a time, which is actually pretty helpful to me, because if they gave me the whole thing at once, I would certainly put it off for a bit. So
Cool.
Actually, I have one more thing to add, Julie, before we move on to the next question. This doesn't occur to everyone, but also in college, you're around people for the most part who are the same age as you. I think when you start working, you are around a lot, like people of really different ages. Like there are 3 men on my team who all have like a 6-year-old daughter. And so it's like really fun to hear about it, but like I can't relate to them in any way. Like, I mean, we're like friends, but I can't relate to them like about their parenting struggles and like, you know, whatnot. And like our company does have new grads, but it's definitely like right now because of COVID, you're not going out and about and meeting a whole lot of people. So I think I do miss that sense of like togetherness that you feel in college. Like, you know, everyone's like taking a final, like everyone's like really excited when you're done. Like I think you can have, you know, a great bond with your teammates, but it's just not the same because like most people are kind of at different walks of life than you.
Cool, definitely. So very nice to hear about everyone's experiences post-grad. So our last question is just, do you have any advice for current students who are looking for internships, full-time jobs, or just general advice for current students as a whole?
Yeah, so I'd say you probably heard this a million times, but I think the hardest part about that for me was getting your foot in the door, that first work experience or opportunity. Like to me, it seemed like a huge catch-22 where I'm like, okay, in order to get experience, I have to already have experience. Like, how does that work? So I would say like I would highly recommend that like extracurriculars or clubs that UC Davis has, like to sort of like try to get your foot into those as much as possible, because that's sort of like the coding and teamwork experience that companies are looking for you like to have. And that's a good alternative to that is like any sort of side project. And I want to clarify that like your side project doesn't have to be like this hugely successful app that takes off. Like, you know, what recruiters want to see is sort of like if you have built up a good consistent record on your GitHub, like you've showed initiative to like want to learn new things, and like you're willing to sort of like push yourself. Like I think that's what they really want to see in, you know, the applicants that come their way.
I think I don't have a lot of like good advice for this, because I certainly just like took the first internship I got and then just kept coming back for 2 years. But I do think like another thing that's important, like some of the clubs, just like make some friends in your major. I think you'd be surprised, like somebody else can like maybe refer you, or someone older is already working in industry or has like a new grad position, they can help you too. Yeah, just like having like connections, I guess, like networking, you know, I know it's like a buzzword or whatever, but it's actually really important.
I actually feel like I can share some advice about job hunting because I actually like kind of started looking again recently because of Optimize's acquisition. I was like, well, I wanted to work at a startup, and now that we've been acquired, like it's been a bit of a different experience. But I think like Jimmy said, like club experiences really help. Also, something that people don't really consider because it seems intimidating is open source software. I think if you like can contribute to it in some way, or you're interested in some sort of space, just like looking up who, you know, is doing some cool like work in that space, or what, you know, you're interested in, goes a long way. Also, this is really surprising to some people, but Twitter is actually a really like huge networking tool for like in tech for some reason. And like there are a lot of fellowships too. So even if there aren't internships, I think the whole point is to like market yourself, right? And you want to pitch yourself as, you know, if you're applying for software engineering jobs and like a really good software engineer who's built things. If you're applying for PM, then you want to, you know, demonstrate, you know, go to market, like feature, like driving feature development with your engineers type of thing. But anyways, there are a lot of like nonprofits, or and even like where was I going with this? There's something I just said. Oh, fellowships, yes. Fellowships that like they have that are like a couple days or a week. And like companies will invite you to like participate. And I think that like is good too. I think like Twitter had a hackathon a couple months ago. And if you, you know, you work on it, you can put it on your resume and be like, oh, won Twitter's hackathon or did this. And honestly, like I did a fellowship with Twitter my freshman year. And that entire year, I was like applying to internships nonstop. And like, I heard back from like 2 companies that then rejected me because they wanted juniors. And then after I did the Twitter fellowship, and I put it on my resume and like had the Twitter recruiters look over it, like Intel finally like was the first company that anyone, you know, I had ever heard of that reached back out to me. And once like I had Intel on my resume, like I had a little bit more, like I was able to get another job that, you know, I got that was like part-time. And like, you know, I did this thing during school with Google Cloud. It was kind of like a campus developer advocacy role. And that really like got my foot in the door with like optimizing other companies that use Google Cloud as their like infrastructure. Because like, you know, things like that you don't do in school, and it shows like some sort of knowledge, like it shows like initiative. Like literally one of the people, like one of the not recruiters but like engineering heads at Optimize, it was like, yeah, like I saw that you had that on your resume, and then I passed it on to like, you know, who was the woman who used to be my EM. And I was like, whoa, like it really is like one of those chain reaction types of things, like that Jimmy is saying, like getting your foot in the door and then it like just keeps building. And I think like just keep at it. I think it's really easy to get like frustrated or feel let down if you keep getting rejected, like either from the resume screen or from like a technical interview, but just keep going. And another thing is you should definitely reach out on LinkedIn to people who are UC Davis alumni. For like the 3 or 4 years I was in school, LinkedIn didn't have this feature that it has now. And it shows you if like Davis alumni or wherever you went to school work there. So like if I was looking, if I, like when I was kind of like looking recently and I saw a startup I was interested in that I didn't know anyone at, I would like shoot them a note on LinkedIn and be like, hey, like I saw you went to UC Davis, like go Ags, you know, exclamation. And like I was wondering if you like could chat about this role. And like, you know, it's not going to work 9 times out of 10. It works like 2 times out of 10, but it's like really worth the effort. And then if you have done your research on the company and on like, you know, what the company does, or, you know, what you would possibly want to do with the company, like a lot of times people are going to give you a referral. Like actually, and 2 years ago, I did this with this company called Verily Life Sciences. This is like a lot of information, but I hope it's helpful for people here because people gave me this advice and I have found it to be really helpful. But I reached out to this guy who actually didn't even go to UC Davis. He like went to Stanford and he responded to me and he was really kind and we like talked on the phone and then he like referred me to Verily. Unfortunately, by the time like Verily's roles were posted, like I had signed my Optimize the offer. But I was very surprised that like this person who didn't know me at all, like went to a completely different school, worked at a company that like honestly doesn't hire a lot of people and is pretty selective in this their process, was like willing to, you know, talk to me. And I think he was like happy that I was excited about their mission too, and you know, introed me to his recruiter. So it goes a long way, and I think it's a really important skill to practice for the rest of your life. Like it's not like you're going to know everyone at a company, and like job applications do go down to black box. It's not like a myth that when people say that.
Oh, you read it, Thomas.
Zoom has a helpful feature that says you're unmuted. I like that. Good stuff. Yeah, I think this is all great advice. My couple things that I want to add on is, I guess, don't stress or more than you need to. It's already so stressful as it is. And I can't imagine, going through this current time and also the job hunting application or job hunting process along with school and clubs. And that sounds like way too much. So take it easy on yourself, be your own friend. And the Davis community should pride itself on helping and supporting each other and not making this a competitive environment. So we should, always look out for each other, especially in times like these, to make sure that everyone's getting the help they need and everyone's landing in a good spot. The next thing is when you're doing, I think there's a nature to optimize stuff. Sorry, Harshita, I don't mean to hit on your company, but yeah, a lot of people try to optimize. Oh, hey, if I do this project, is this going to look great on my resume? Or if I take this class, is this what recruiters are looking for? I think the biggest thing, the most benefit I've ever had was just doing stuff that I've had fun with, that I wanted to do. Like this one time, I remember the summer, Amazon was giving free socks for making an Alexa app. And I really wanted that. But it was socks. It was probably like $5 max. And I was like, I made it. I went through it. I had a lot of fun. And now it's on my resume and people ask me about it. And all I wanted was socks. And actually, in the end, I didn't even get socks. So that was a ripoff. But I still had fun. And that's what matters.
Yeah, plus 100. But don't have too much fun. No, I'm kidding. Have all the fun you want. I'm not your mom.
Okay, cool. So then that does conclude like the more moderated portion of our panel. We can open up the rest of the time to if any of our attendees have any questions. Feel free to come off chat and ask, or want to message in the chat. Come off mute and ask, or if you just want to message in the chat and ask your question there as well. So yeah, any questions? Okay, so I think there is a question in the chat from Sarab. So what concepts should we focus on more to get an internship? Anyone wants to take that one?
What kind of internship? I mean, there are different types of internships, so it really depends on, well, even in SWE is
software. He just said software intern or yeah.
I don't know, because like software engineering is such a broad field, and like obviously you can't do everything under the umbrella of software engineering. It's exploded over the years, like what you can do. So yeah, I don't know. Someone else can take.
Well, I guess like maybe we can talk about the second one. But it talks like Abhirup asked about the different internships. So there's there can be like DevOps software engineering internships where people work on a lot of like deployment pipelines and how to I don't know. And then there are also like site reliability engineering internships. They're definitely more specialized. I think when you look at internships at startups, you can know what teams that you can apply for because they list them on their Lover page. But I think with larger companies, there's sometimes they also actually they have it like they have the team listed. So if they have like software engineer intern comma like infrastructure team, then you can know it's like, you know, using like a lot of like AWS or like use like writing a lot of Terraform, which is like a basically like it's kind of like a tool / like code. I guess you can think of it as code. Yeah, code that you use to like manage and automate infrastructure. So like if you want to do that, then you could like look into AWS documentation, or like if you are interested in like very general software engineering, then like I honestly don't know like what else other than software engineer, DevOps, and infrastructure there would be. Maybe there's like product engineering, which is more like full stack focused. So like if you're trying to get a full stack internship, then like try to do something where like try to build an app that, you know, you're interested in building, but do it from like literally build the entire stack, like build the front end, build the back end, you know, and that's a really good, that's like fun because you built this thing and then now you have like these new skills to show. Infrastructure is a little bit harder to like study for because you don't use it in school, but maybe you can like, I don't know, watch a bunch of videos on like Kubernetes and like AWS or something. Yeah, I mean, does that answer your question? I guess I kind of tried to answer both a little bit, partly. Cool.
So I do want to add, this is sort of anecdotal evidence from my personal experience, but I got my first internship, like I think I had like a 3.2 or something GPA when I got my first internship. And at my school, like that's pretty below average for the CS major. And like, I guess looking back, I'm not that surprised, but at the moment I was sort of surprised. I was like, who would even look at my resume and let me have a chance with like, you know, a GPA that was lower than that of my peers who are also applying. And like sort of now that I've interviewed people and I've seen people's resumes who come in the door at Gusto, I sort of understand like why that was the case from like a recruiting perspective. It seemed that like the resumes that our recruiters let in were ones who like showed or more emphasis on any type of experience like over your GPA. And like I've noticed that pattern as I interview candidates. So I would say that sort of answer your question, like what should we focus more on to get an internship? I would say, sure, like grades are important at the end of the day, but like if I were to have to pick like between like good grades and say spending my time instead of focusing on like classes to do like a side project that I was genuinely interested in, like I would definitely pick like the latter. And I think so would like recruiters who are trying to decide like whether to give you an interview or not.
Yeah, that's like so true. I haven't had my GPA on my resume in like 4 years because someone told me that if you don't have like a 3.7, don't put it on your resume. And I was like, well, all right. I was like, I don't have a 3.7 right now. So, and if they have a bar, like if they have like a bar of like, oh, you have to be above a 3.5 or something, like just don't, maybe like try again in a couple of quarters, or maybe that's also not a good company for you. Like I remember I went to like a Facebook like info panel like my freshman year, and the guy was a UC Davis alum, and he was like, I had a 2.6 when I was at Davis, and I was like shocked. I was like, oh my God, because like I used to think Facebook was like, I mean, it is, they do have like a high technical bar, so I'm not gonna hate on it, but like I was like, oh whoa, like this guy with like a 2.6 like works at Facebook, like what? But yeah, like it's honestly like about the experience, like Jimmy said. Sorry, I'm like really trying to drill it in the point.
And someone asked about research experience. And I guess I'll answer that as well. Yeah, like I think any and all type of experience will help you land a tech internship. Like it may seem like tangential, but like when you're in a research setting, you're still having to collaborate with people. Like you're ultimately like, you know, exercising your muscle to solve problems and like work in a domain that's not familiar like to you. So like those are also important takeaways. even from like a research internship that like will help you land, say, like a role in a traditional software engineering role.
Yeah, plus one to that. It's not so much exactly what you do, but it's kind of building your like technical presence, just saying, hey, I can solve these problems. It might not be the problems that you're solving, but you know, I can solve problems. And so at Google, like the internship process, or the full-time process, you're most likely going to be brought on as a general software engineering person. It doesn't really matter what you've done in the past, whether it's more research or computer science. I mean, obviously, if you've done enough research, you can qualify for a research position, but most people go through the software engineering route, and no matter what your background, you're most likely expected to solve somewhat different problems. That's totally fine.
I think also like new grad roles tend to be pretty flexible. So I know a lot of companies actually have like programs where you'll work with a team for like a few months and then you rotate to another one, because like companies also want to make sure you're doing something you're interested in. So they'll try to like give you a lot of exposure to different projects, so you can kind of get a better idea.
So I think someone asked if you could please describe one of the projects that you've made. And there's another question about technical and behavioral interviews.
Sure, I can describe one of the projects that we did. So a little background about this. So a vast majority of Gusto's like customers are small businesses, and like they're using us to run payroll and manage their team. So when the pandemic sort of hit in like April, and a lot of companies were facing like economic hardship, and just sort of like the general climate was like really bad for small businesses. One of the projects that a couple of people on the team, including me, worked on was a project to allow like our customers to sort of like pause their services with us. So they would no longer have to pay us, but they would still be like on our platform. Yeah, like that was part of the project. Another part of the project was, okay, like how can we keep these customers on our platform and then have them pay us back sometime in the future when they're like more financially able to, since like normally we'd bill them at the end of every month. And since a lot of businesses are running out of cash, this was not possible for them in the current moment. So that was one of the projects I think I was sort of like the most proud to work on, since like it really had a tangible impact on just like all the small businesses that we're working with, and then sort of just allowing them to continue to pay their employees and whatnot and have their employees on our platform without just like kicking them off, which would be like a mean thing to do if they couldn't pay us.
So I think Alex also asked a question about some strategies that you have to prepare for technical and behavioral interviews, aside from maybe grinding lead code for the technical portion. If anyone wants to kind of talk about how they prepared for the interviews for their companies or how they even got into their companies in general.
Unfortunately, I think it's like unavoidable to grind lead code. Like there's going to be some algorithm question you're going to have to answer, and you're going to have to know the answer. Whether or not you need to grind lead code for that, I guess that's like a personal thing. To kind of like just keep reiterating the point a lot of people have been making, being able to talk about like some other projects you worked on is pretty important, especially if it's like something you can show that you're actually interested in doing. I think people really like to see that.
Yeah, lead code is like unavoidable. Like it's really sad because I personally don't like lead code. There are companies that do work on like that have some more practical problem solving interviews now. Like they'll give you some code and they'll say like, oh, this is the issue that's happening. Like how can we prevent this from happening in the future? And that's honestly where like your coding ability, like your debugging skills from classes will come in, because I've actually had a couple of those and I really like those because they're very practical. And, you know, or like having some sort of data and using how to use a data structure to like process it and then return, you know, having some algorithm to do that. So don't like completely rule out practical problem solving problems either, is I guess what I would say. But also for new grads, I think a lot of new grads should be aware that system design interviews are something that you might have to do. And so there are some good resources like on YouTube that I've checked out personally, because after you even have like 1 year of experience, or even if, you know, as a new grad, like they'll have systems design interviews. So pretty worth checking out, and cracking the coding interview, of course. So by Gail McDowell, I think is her name.
I also wanted to follow up and mention that a little HackDavis plug, but we do have a workshop on preparing for technical and behavioral interviews later today at 4 p.m. So you can find the link for that on our website, and it'll also be hosted by another current software engineer at Google who is not Thomas. But it is 1:56, so we're coming up on the hour here. So we're going to start transitioning over into the grad student panel, which will be beginning in just a couple of minutes. But if people did want to stick around, can you actually first maybe like mention in chat if you are interested in sticking around, so then I can open breakout rooms for our panelists to kind of go in for maybe a couple of minutes and answer more questions if anyone has any. Otherwise, we can definitely just wrap up the panel here. Thank you so much to each of our representatives for speaking today. I know I definitely learned a lot from hearing more about your individual experiences. And I'm sure that it was really helpful for each of the people who were attending here today as well. So